So what exactly is project scope management? The PMBOK guide defines it as the set of processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Let's look at an example. We've often returned back to Appico Software, one of the fictional companies we use for our various scenarios. And in the last course, we talked about how Appico is designing a new app called AppyPic, which is a photo sharing app. Let's say that we are sitting down to discuss what it is that we want to include from a feature point of view in the next version of AppyPic. We might want to include, obviously, the ability to capture photos. That could be important, leveraging those camera APIs on our mobile devices. We'll want to be compatible with both iOS and Android in order to make sure that we can reach a broader market than either platform alone could offer. We want to build in some photo filters. We think we have something to offer here where we can help people make their photos look better and make it so that they want to share them because they look so good using these filters. Of course, if they're going to share them, then it makes sense to leverage connections to various social networks, Facebook, Twitter, or others out there. We want to make sure that we can plug in with those as well, so we need to have that as part of our project scope from the outset. We also want to be able to crop to preset sizes. So if people want to share their photos as a particular resolution that might be good for a phone's wallpaper background, for example, for certain popular models of the iPhone in particular, then we could do that. If they want them to be square, then we could certainly do that and create a simulated Polaroid effect, for example. And we also want to have a web view of photos so that people who don't have the app can also go and see these pictures and then have a call to action that would allow them to download the app and begin using it themselves. All of these different features we would consider to be in scope for this project. Now, there are a number of different features that we might want to add, but that we won't be able to add in this release, either due to time constraints, resource constraints, or because it's simply not a top priority for the company at this time. Those might include a variety of other features, such as the ability to create slideshows, support older versions of iOS and Android, generate photo books that can be printed out and shared in a more manual or in a more tangible sense, and support for tablet devices like iPad. All of these features would be considered out of scope for this release. Scope management is ensuring that we are accomplishing those things that are in scope while making sure that we aren't wasting resources or focus dealing with things that are outside of the scope for the app, even if it's something that we might intend to go back and include in a future version. We'll leave that to an expanded scope when that version rolls along. There are also two different types of scope that we refer to. The first is product scope, of which our previous example is a good demonstration. Those are the end product's features and functions, the things that the end user or the customer, whoever is going to be the beneficiary of this project, the type of different features and functions that they care about. Sometimes product scope is considered to be simply part of project scope. Especially in less complex projects, we don't necessarily separate these two. However, in bigger projects, it's important to be able to separate out what's required for the product itself and what's required from a more administrative sense to make that project come to life. Project scope includes work performed to deliver the end product with specified features and functions in place. So, from a product standpoint, we may only care about being compatible with both operating systems, for example, but that might require extended work on our back end to make sure that we are able to support both. That wouldn't necessarily be considered product scope if it's beyond what we would just associate with the product itself, but rather other actions, other administrative duties that had to happen in order to be able to bring those features to fruition. Therefore, project scope often involves additional work that might be required in order to fulfill the product scope. Another important term to be familiar with and comfortable with is the scope baseline, because this is one of the chief outputs of the project scope management process. It includes three key components. These include the project scope statement, which describes the project scope in a narrative sense. It also describes the major deliverables, as well as the assumptions and the different constraints that we're going to face throughout the project. It covers both project and product scope. The work breakdown structure is a visualization of all project work broken down into individual pieces called work packages that include identifying and control information that helps us know how far along we are with each and every manageable piece of a project. Finally, the WBS dictionary is a sister document to the work breakdown structure. It includes more detail. Because the WBS is very visual in nature, it looks sort of like an organizational chart most of the time. There's not necessarily room for all of the information you need to actually accomplish the work shown at each level of that hierarchy. That's where the WBS dictionary comes into play. It includes more detailed information related to work attributes, requirements, and assumptions. The scope baseline includes all the work that must be done on a project. And oftentimes, in fact, most of the time, it's used as your primary point of comparison when controlling processes throughout the project. Knowing what the scope baseline has within can give you an idea of what it is that you're supposed to accomplish, what the details are of each of those pieces of work, so that when you go in to ensure that that's what's being accomplished, you have that primary reference at hand. The scope baseline, because it's so important as a comparative device, must only be modified via formal change control methods. We can't just willy-nilly go and change things in here without informing everyone in a process that we've already set and agreed upon, because we could end up doing the wrong type of work, or working on an older version, or not including everything that's necessary for the project to succeed. The scope baseline must only be updated when changes have been approved as well. It shouldn't be approved in a preemptive sense because we think a change might be included within the scope as we move forward. We need to know for sure before we go in and make changes to these formal documents, because we do use them as those very vital and valuable points of comparison.